Hey everyone, it's Caleb. The podcast you're about to listen to is about 35 minutes of a conversation Bodes and I were having before David hopped on to do the live reading of his new article on why he's no longer libertarian. We planned to only record for an hour, went for 2 hours, and because it was so long and there was such a change in topic once David hopped on, I decided to clip out the first half was just Bodes and I talking, so it's not a complete podcast. It's a lot shorter than you're probably used to. Excuse me. Um, and it's gonna end out of nowhere, but we still talk about some cool stuff, cover some cool topics. Hope you enjoy. And we're live. Sorry for cutting you off there, Bodes. You started talking about to hit the button.
No, it's fine because I was going to mention we should do it live. I was going to ask you if you're having any drinks tonight.
I am. Let me just get you this link tweeted out real quick, and then I keep typing in
Alright.
Bodes instead of at available username.
I really should change my at some point, but
Yeah.
it's really funny to me because
It's
it's
not wanting to
impossible to
come up.
describe. Because it's impossible to describe it to people. Because is the available even spelled correctly? I know username
don't-
isn't. Available username spelled correctly was taken, and I thought it'd be really funny to do that.
Yeah,
The one which is spelled
it's so hard to
incorrectly.
find. I can't even find you right now. I have to just go and copy and paste it in. Forgot the at symbol. Okay, there we go. Link is sent. Yes, I am having a drink tonight. I will be having blueberry Red Bull mixed with Smirnoff Red, White, and Berry vodka.
Well, you're getting fancy. I'm having a Pilsner and then
Nice.
a lager. Yeah, one is very resilient, the other is like Argentinian, but no big deal. It's just a lager. And the Pilsner, which is also just a lager, but lighter, I suppose,
Very cool.
at the end of the day.
So, how have you been celebrating post Lent?
I'm not
I'll save you
sure.
as Wizen Bodes. What are you doing?
I'm not sure. I'm just going to university, and I don't know if how I'm celebrating in a sense. I'm just like living life normally, but I've been confirmed this Easter. And
That's very
I don't know.
good.
I'm very much more I don't find myself discouraged by my own wretchedness anymore. Really, at least not for
Nice.
very long. Like it's something really like you don't feel it. At least I did not feel anything at confirmation in the delivering of a sacrament itself, but man, afterwards, it's like this very subtle shift that you only really notice when you pay attention to it. It's like I don't feel like discouraged or whatever anymore. I'm like, let's start doing more things, and I kind of, I feel more confident. If life feels a little bit brighter, it's weird. Before that, like the week before I was confirmed, I was like very depressed, which was interesting. I really I think Grant posted this in the Discord as well. It's like the devil really does work overtime during Lent. And man, in that last week, holy shit. It's like only when you're out of it, it's like, wow, that was weird. That's not like me. Very weird. Very weird.
Yeah, it lends a struggle every year. You pick something, yeah, I can go with that Red Bull, that's fine. And then during Lent, it's just like, I've never wanted a Red Bull more. I've never wanted to do this more. Every little struggle starts, every little sin just starts feeling worse. And you're like, wow, I am an awful, awful person.
Yeah.
There's no way God could ever love me. And then then you go to confess it, and it's great again. And you mess up again, you go to confess it again, rinse, repeat. Then Easter hits, and you're just like, Christ is risen, baby. Let's go.
Let's go. We're back. We're back. We're not in the desert anymore, bitches. We're out of there.
Lent is 40 days of it's so over, followed by the rest of the year, like, we're so back, baby. We're so back.
It's weird. Last Lent was not hard at all for me. It was almost like I needed to up the ante this time, so I stopped reading, pleasure reading, basically. Like I think that was partly really good because I read more of the Bible. I picked a copy while I was in Norway. I picked a copy of the Bible which has both Norwegian and English because it was just in the hotel room. It was Gideon, of course. So I picked it up and I brought it home because I found that fascinating because you can see the etymological roots of like you can see the similarities between English and Norse sometimes, and sometimes it's like fucking bizarre gobbledygook. But it's fun. It's fun. I managed to read like I think 3 of St. Paul's letters. I remember,
Nice.
yeah. I remember it was Romans, Corinthians, and I forget what the third one was because the third one was out of order. It wasn't sequential. I forget what it was.
I can't remember which one it was. I can't remember what the Paul letters Paul wrote. He wrote a lot.
Dude, he wrote a lot. I only like I'm not gonna remember all like kind of Galatians, Corinthians, Romans.
He Thessalonians.
I don't fucking.
I don't remember. Well, Catholics, people, we're not gonna know Bible stuff like that.
We're gonna be really bad at that.
I can explain it to you well enough, but then you're like, well, where's that at? Like, oh, it's somewhere in Revelations, dude. I don't know. Like,
I do wish I was more committed to memorizing the Bible. Right now, I'm going to start doing the spiritual exercises by Saint Ignatius of Loyola.
Nice.
Like starting this Monday, but I do kind of admire that in Protestants, where if they can just say in the middle of a conversation, like when Matt Fradd like interviews an ex-Protestant, like someone like Keith Nestor or someone like that, where they're like, it's like in Ephesians 3:15, and I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
and then he quotes it like verbatim perfectly, and you can check like you'll find a version of the Bible, whatever, maybe it was RSV, maybe it was like NKJV or just KJV. It's like that is verbatim what he said, and like that, and I think that's actually quite admirable.
It is. That's one thing I love about talking to my Protestant friends is I can make a scriptural alert into something and they'll be able to cite it for me. I'm like, yes, thank you for knowing that one because I wasn't gonna remember the details.
Just thank you. Sure if they have Baruch, just make sure it's
they
like,
do not.
Yeah, I forget what the seven deuterocanonical books. What's the one with virtue in the eyes?
Tobit. That's Tobit.
Tobit. It's Tobit, Baruch. Yeah. Is it Jude and Nestor?
It's extra books of Esther, extra chapters of Esther, extra chapters of Zone. Not Daniel.
Jude. Daniel. Okay.
Yeah. There's First, Second Maccabees, Tobit, Sirach, Ecclesiastes.
Sirach. Yeah.
I think there's one more, but I can't remember what it is. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on it. Great books, though. I mean, I remember I was talking to some Protestant friends of mine at a party once. And they were talking about I was like, I've been thinking a lot about sin and where sin comes from. Like, what is the foundation of sin? And I'm just like, it's pride. Because what makes you say that? I'm like, Sirach 10:2, root of all sin is pride. Like, right there.
Because the Bible says so.
Yeah,
I really thought you were going to launch into an explanation of what pride is and how obviously it is the chief root of all. Like, no, the Bible says so.
Bible says it right there.
It really is an admirable ability to be able to 360 no-scope someone with scripture.
Which is what made Aquinas so great.
I think that's good. Yeah,
that's what made St. Thomas so good. He was just
God is people say was it the objection to God might be a material body, but he just says God is a spirit, from the Gospels.
Which is why I get so mad at some Protestant historians who they argue medieval philosophy and Thomism specifically departed from the Bible in favor of Aristotle, and it's like you clearly never read Aquinas. There's more scriptural references than anything else.
Yeah, in fact,
he relies on that a lot.
A lot of fairly hardcore, Aristotle historians will actually disagree with Thomas's interpretation of Aristotle on certain issues, where Aristotle is somewhat ambiguous. They will lean towards basically what would be the non-Christian answer, because they think he was a non-fucking Christian, obviously. Whereas Aquinas, if Aristotle's ambiguous or he might be wrong, but if I interpret this way, he's kind of right. He will usually give him a pious interpretation when he's wrong. He won't correct Aristotle most of the time, or he'll not. He won't correct Aristotle in the sense that he's not gonna. I don't know. Maybe I haven't read his commentaries on him, but when he cites him in the section that I read of Summa Theologiae, he's not going to correct Aristotle. He'll just use him to support his argument because the point of the book is not to fucking see if Aristotle was wrong or right. It's to establish principles of theology. But he will give I've seen the argument that he will give a more pious interpretation to Aristotle than his otherwise correct from a non-biased point of view.
Yeah. But non-biased is dumb, so I want to just be biased about it.
Yeah, of course. Aristotle's a
Like,
virtuous
this
pagan. Green
this is
Halo
why.
wins. Is it St. Pat's? I forget which
Yeah, I think
church
it's St. Patrick's. Yeah,
Yeah,
green halos.
dude, I went to St. Patrick's and I forgot I would have taken a picture.
Oh,
I didn't take a
would've been
picture
so
of
cool.
anywhere in St. Pat's because, like, immediately after the mass there ended, which I was attending, like another mass began, and I felt like, dude, I'm not gonna be a tourist at church during mass. But if I knew there was the Aristotle with the green halo, I would have taken the fucking picture, dude. Like, I would say, I don't care. I'll do it.
I'll take the photo. No, when it comes to like being biased and stuff, like this is why I love Hilaire Belloc so much, is that he's just openly a Roman propagandist. Like openly, Rome was correct, Church is correct. Here's why all of you are wrong. And I'm like, good. Thank you for being objectively biased.
Say it. And he'll just say, like, you don't ever get the impression from Hilaire Belloc or Chesterton that they're secretly hiding the fact that they're not biased from you, that they're biased from you. If they're not, like, no, he's not hiding that at all in any way, shape, or form. He's like, of course I'm biased. I believe in the truth, and the truth is the Catholic Church. I'm not biased towards lies. There's no, you can't be neutral between truth and lies, and one thing is the truth and the other is not.
I love it. The honesty in Belloc and Chesterton is just so refreshing and fun. That's why I've been going back to like the Catholic manualist of like the 20th century. There's so many great books in those, like that genre of the manualist. I love it was Father Frederick Coperston, Charles S. Copeland, I think. Now I want to say it's that guy.
I've heard Father Copeland.
He has a great book on Introduction to Logic, Introduction to Moral Theology, and he has a point where like any follower of the church and student of philosophy would be a fool not to solve problems by going to the source of truth itself.
Yeah,
like yes, obviously. Thank you.
So when Elizabeth Anscombe couldn't, whenever there was one objection to the philosophical argument for God from Russell, the objection was basically, well, all the arguments for God, and this one's actually a fair enough point, all the arguments for God start with contingent premises, but they have a necessary conclusion. Their conclusion is that there must be a necessary being, but the premises for all the 5 ways, for example, are contingent. Like they could not be the case, and generally you can't make a contingent argument from necessary premises. So she was like, she just went and prayed on it for like a year, and then she had a counter example. The counter example is actually beyond my ability to explain. It's not even that complicated. Like it's in a fucking footnote, dude. Like, it's a really, like, she never wrote it down. It's her daughter who wrote the counter example down when she was editing her books, because her daughter, one of her 7 sons and daughters, became a philosopher too. And she wrote it down, but it's like I wasn't really paying attention when I read it. It's in the book Faith and Hard Ground, or Faith on the Hard Ground, which is a collection of her more religious essays and lectures. And it's a really good collection. It's the one where it's like I 100% set this to the book club in Discord, where she explains how to teach the Eucharist to young children. And there is the moment where if you teach it correctly, she saw this happen, like when the mother when a friend of hers who had her child with her came back from receiving the Eucharist and was next to her son, and her son asked, is he within you? Is the Lord within you? And she said yes. And then he genuflected to her stomach.
Oh, that's sweet.
It's like very sweet. It's like, you will get them to respect it if you just explain it well. And it's basically teaching how to explain it and some of the mysteries of it, where she kind of makes the argument that the Eucharist would be weirder and more mysterious if it was just a symbol. Like, if it's just a symbol, it's a very weird symbol. But if it at least denotes a reality, you can kind of sort of wrap your head around it. But if it's just a symbol, it's a very weird, like...
If it's just a symbol, I say that...
better symbols.
If it's just a symbol, I say the hello said, Flannery O'Connor.
Yeah, of course. It's like, I don't care if it's just a symbol.
Exactly. I've been reading John a lot recently, and I got to the part of John because unless you eat this bread and drink this blood, you have no life in you.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, it's very literal. How the literalist people don't understand that one bothers me.
In fact, is it in John or is it in one of the other Gospels where, like, when he says this, like, he basically asks the apostles, like, "Will you turn away from me too?" Because a lot of people were like, "What the fuck are you talking about? If you did not eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you are not with me."
Dude,
If
that's
I were,
even it's and
bizarre.
I understand why so many people turned away because I was listening to Brand Pite's book, Jesus and the Jewish Roots of the Eucharist. And like it was very big saying in the Jewish tradition, like, no, we do not touch blood. We don't touch blood. We don't belong to blood. We don't do anything with blood. You cannot drink blood or eat blood. Very specific rule. And he's just like, unless you drink my blood, you have no life in you. And it's like that is a very hard saying for Jewish minds to grapple with. I think it's well founded, obviously. Obviously. And this Brand Pite has interesting stuff about how it had to be that way to fulfill certain things and why it makes sense, like typologically and stuff. But you see why so many people turned away. I think it was Jeremy on one of the CZ Q&A episodes when they asked, "What's the weirdest Christian belief?" He's saying, "What's something that's a Catholic belief that causes people like discomfort? What's a weird one?" He goes, "Oh, the Eucharist is the weirdest thing ever. We're eating somebody."
And the Trinity, yeah, it's the Eucharist
Yeah.
and the Trinity. It's like it's kind of weirder than the heresies.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really weird. Chesterton speaks of this in The Everlasting Man, where like every time you think the church has like it's faced with like 2 or 3 options, it's got to pick one of those. It's got to pick between Arianism, Nestorianism, monophysitism, whatever, and the church picks like a secret 4th one, which is it's like what the fuck? It's like that's even weirder than all the other ones. It's like, well, it's true.
There is something weird about like the heresies make more. How do I put this? When you first hear a heresy, when you like first get studying Christianity, you're not fully grasping on like the points of doctrine. You hear a heresy, like, yeah, that seems like a reasonable explanation. That seems like an interesting way to account for and solve the problem. And you begin to think about, no, it actually contradicts the mysteries. And I'd rather have the mysteries than the incorrect logical view. You know?
Yeah, I remember I basically for a while. This is still one of my favorite moments in Discord, where like I kind of I didn't know what Nestorianism was, but I was researching basically how the hypostatic union worked. And I realized I was basically an historian. And I was like, okay, I've got to get to the bottom of how it worked. I don't know if I don't know if I'm going to remember it correctly, and I'm not going to use Wikipedia again because that's gay. So basically, if I remember correctly, my problem was I think I believed, if I'm remembering my own thought process correctly, that there was only one will in Christ. But there are actually 2, or is it 2 wills? I need to see. But basically, but my problem was Christ cannot be one person if there are 2 wills. There need to be 2 people. Because I would understand it my understanding, if Christ has a human nature and Christ has a God nature, part of human nature, from my understanding, is to have a will. Whereas part of the nature of God is to also have a will. But if he has both natures, then he has 2 wills. But my understanding of a human person, and of, I suppose, my very diminutive, small understanding of what a divine person is, every will instantiates a person, at least one. Maybe in the divine will, 1 instantiates 3. I don't know. I need to look into the Trinity for that. But in my understanding, at least one human person instantiates 1 will. But actually, Christ is 1 fucking person. He's not 2. So I was like, okay, I need to fucking and I remember I posted a shit ton from like the Catholic Encyclopedia, from like I think several different saints, like arguing over this. At one point, I finally kind of accepted it. Like I finally heard enough good reasons to accept it, but there wasn't a definitive argument. There was a lot of interesting stuff. Like usually people describe the incarnation as God descending from the heavens and humbling himself. And that's true. St. Paul talks about that Christ made himself humble even unto death. But at the same time, theologically, what we have to say is not that God came down, because God can't change. God is eternal. What we have to say, what is correct to say, is that a human nature was elevated and united to God's. Not that God's nature descended to a human level. It's the fact that Christ our Lord was elevated. His human nature, I should say, was elevated to a divine level and then united to God the Son. And that when we are baptized into his death, into his life, we are baptized into that relation.
Well, that gets into the point of theosis. This is brought up in the early Greek fathers, and it's more of a prevalent in Orthodoxy. But like the point of living is to fully align our will with the will of the Father, through what they would call the process of theosis, and what we would call this man fully actualized. Is that we are most free when we are, one with our wills are aligned with that of the Father. I think it's Saint Irenaeus, the glory of God is man fully alive. And that's like the purpose of what we're supposed to be doing. Is like the goal of theosis, to be of one will with the Father, to be completely aligned on our things. Once it gets to the point that we can only do that because Christ sanctified our human nature by elevating it in his own person and then sharing that through baptism.
Yes. I only realized this later. I think it might have been, it was probably Ratzinger, now that I think about it. I was reading something of his. Maybe To Look on Christ. It might have been To Look on Christ, where because I didn't really understand the theology of baptism. I hadn't really looked into it. I just kind of accepted that it was a sacrament that forgave, washed away original sin and all sins until then. I just sort of accepted that because, I can accept marriage without looking into theology of the body or whatever. Though it deepens that understanding, I can sort of get by until I read more. And I really only understood baptism when I read that, and then I was in Norway rereading Romans, and St. Paul says that you're baptized into his death and into his life. It's like, oh, I finally get it. I finally get that we are members of the body of Christ. It's like it's a mystical body, but it's almost literal in the sense of like, no, you are now part of his life. And that's when I really understood atonement. Because I understood atonement in like a kind of intellectual sense, but not really like with my full being, if that makes sense. Where you don't really understand atonement until you realize that now that you were joined to Christ, his merits are now yours. So every time you sin, you speak against him. And then you realize how grave it is to sin. It's only when you realize atonement and you understand baptism and you understand you're joined together with him that you realize how grave sin is.
Yeah,
it's all very beautifully tied together.
No, it is. That's one thing I do love about being Catholic. Is that it's all interconnected. Understanding one point of theology helps you understand every other parts of it. It helps you better order your life towards the will of the Father, to better order your life to fulfilling theosis. I really like the interconnect. Like when I was Protestant, there's a lot of things like that doesn't click. That contradicts this contradicts that. How do I make it all click? And Catholicism, it all clicks, which is very nice. And where there might be, differences of opinions in different schools, the church allows for disagreement. So you have a Scotus take or Thomist take. And I've been thinking about Scotus a lot, actually. I think I'm gonna pick up a Scotus book soon and try to read it, because I'm visiting Scotus and saying a lot of interesting stuff about Scotus that I need to check out.
Yeah, I should one day check out Scotus, but I'm going to be honest, every time I struggle with reading St. Thomas or reading a Thomist, I pray to God, please, God, do not make me a fucking Scotus. Please, God, please don't make me fucking get into another Catholic philosopher. Please, God, let him be wrong. I'm just like, please don't make me fucking read more shit to be right. Please. Let's be right and let me be stupid enough not to understand it.
Well, I found this out about Scotus. Apparently, all the beef that's between like Dominicans and Franciscans over Scotus and Thomism, apparently we have very few left, but there was a bunch of lecture notes Scotus had written on like St. Thomas's metaphysics, and he referred to him as the expositor. As like a title for him. But sadly, we lost most of those because the English.
By the time Scotus was alive, I believe St. Thomas was a saint, because he was baptized he was one of the very quick canonization processes, if I remember correctly.
But sadly, the Anglicans burned a lot of Scotus, which is frustrating. I mean, they burned Scotus works and they killed St. Thomas More. Why? Why
St.
does he have?
Thomas More
Why
was
does he?
more political, so I
Yeah.
understand. Because St. Thomas More, I forget what his legal position was, but he was, I don't know, the district attorney of the entirety of England. I don't know what the equivalent
Yeah.
would be. Something like that.
Mhm.
And he basically said, like, yeah, you can't kill your wife and get remarried. Was basically what he said.
So
Or
cool.
you can't get remarried, like it's not, you're not actually
Divorce
married.
isn't real.
It's not real.
Quite mad.
Still, Past Master is so good. It's one of the best books. Like,
I
it's complete fucking
downloaded it.
fiction. It's so. It's one of the most bizarre novels you will ever read.
I have it downloaded and it's on my list. Once I'm done going through After Virtue from McIntyre, I'm going to hop into more fiction.
How is After Virtue? Because I haven't read it.
It's good. He's a very clear and concise, also, which I appreciate.
Yeah, he has a book on Edith Stein, by the way.
He does,
which I have downloaded on the philosophy.
I'll have to check that out. He's definitely an interesting thing. I like how he opens his book with there's 2 great lines in his introduction. He writes, so a preface to the second edition or something, and he goes, in the near like 20 years or 30 years, however long it's been since he first published the book, because I've heard many objections to my position, none of them good enough to make me change my mind, pretty much. Like that's how he kind of opens it with, like, I've heard plenty of objections, and I've not heard one to make me change my mind yet. And it's like, cool. And the other thing he said was, he said, I apologize for the early bits about Aristotelianism. I now understand to make Aristotelianism work, you have to be a Thomist, because I am now a Thomist. And I'm like, yes, cool. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. You are correct.
But he's not a Thomist, unfortunately.
Yeah, not completely. He has a few points. But he's still alive, right? Is he still alive or did he die?
No, he's still alive. I think
So
he
it is
got
time.
he got an easy theological question wrong, which is hilarious because Peter Geach also did the same. Like, I mean, easy for like philosophers. Like, it should be a slam dunk. Like, when someone asks you this question, you should just like fucking, you get a free pointer, so to speak. It's an easy layup, but yet somehow I remember because Cav Twitter was fucking up in arms about it. I was like, dude, he's like 125. I don't fucking know. It's like, give him some slack.
Cut him slack.
It's like, dude, if he doesn't have dementia, I'd be fucking shocked. Like, calm down. It's fine. Yeah. It's like, dude, he was once like a socialist Marxist, and now he's still a Marxist, but at least a Catholic. So, like, that's insane progress. And he probably took a bunch of socialists and Marxists to his side. So, calm down. He's done a lot of good for the world.
Yes. Speaking of Marxism, have you read any of the Habermas stuff from the Habermas-Benedict debate?
I've read the first half of the Habermas stuff. I need to finish it and then read Benedict's portion because it's not that long.
No, it's
just a little weird to read it. It's like 50 pages. I should knock it out in a day. I was actually thinking of doing it, but then I got busy today. And then we just talk about it. But man, it's like Habermas is what I noticed. He very fully buys into kind of the myth of liberalism.
Yeah, he does.
Peter L. Simpson has a really good book. It's really good for Americans. Its historical portions are really fucking boring for non-Americans. When he starts talking about the Articles of Confederation, I just want to fucking go to sleep. But basically, Peter L. Simpson, who's a mostly Scotist philosopher. It's not like he is like against Thomists or whatever. But he's a Scotist sympathizer and a big Aristotle dude, and a Catholic. He argues in his book Political Liberalism that liberalism is based on a twofold myth. It's based on an anthropological and /philosophical myth and on a historical myth. The historical myth is basically that the state is inescapable, the state as we have now, and he uses the Weberian definition of a state, which should be familiar to anyone who has read Hoppe, because Hoppe fucking uses it in every single one of his books, where it's a monopoly on force, and he basically argues that wasn't the case. Most governments did not have a monopoly on force. They had the authority to use force, but there were other centers of authority, especially the church, most noticeably. And he gives a bunch of historical examples. He gives even examples from, as weird as it happens, the Old Testament. He gives also in philosophy, he gives counterexamples as to what the good life would be from also the Old Testament and Plato. He uses the Republic interestingly enough, as an argument for why the big city, the city of luxury, is unnecessary. He thinks that's one of Plato's secret arguments there. He never says it, but basically the philosopher kings live like the city of pigs that he describes at the beginning, which are the people who don't really have the city of luxury and they're just out in the countryside. The philosopher kings have between themselves the same community that the city of luxury has, that the city of pigs has. Which is one of his counter examples from ancient political philosophy. And then he fucking talks a bunch of stuff about the Articles of Confederation, and I really can give less of a shit about that as a historical example. But I actually do need to finish the book, because that's the negative part where he sort of debunks the claims of liberalism in many ways, anthropologically, through examples of history, and philosophically through, and its sense of the history of political philosophy and political philosophy in general. He used a bunch of counter examples and counter arguments, but that's the negative part. I haven't seen what he actually kind of advocates for, but it seems pretty clear that he's like, maybe the Middle Ages are pretty good. It's called. I mean, the book is called Political Illiberalism, so
Yeah.
He was interviewed by Russia Today, which was really funny because I searched his name on Google and I was like, that's the first time I've seen like a SCOTUS be interviewed by Russia Today.
It was very weird. I'm struggling with reading the book. I've read the Pope Benedict side before, or Cardinal Ratzinger side. It's really good. It's great. The Habermas side, I've tried, and I eventually had to download an audiobook on Habermas, and I had to download an audiobook, A Swords of Introduction to Continental Philosophy, so I can understand Habermas'
Really?
book.
Dude, it's like 25 pages.
Yeah, but I'm just not getting it. I'm reading it, and I'm like, okay, these are words. I recognize these words. Then he makes an argument. I'm like, I don't fully. I grasp enough that I could probably respond to it, but I don't grasp enough to explain what it is on a podcast yet.
Yeah, there's this weird. Because part of the myth of political philosophy that Simpson takes down and that Habermas seems to be completely on is the myth of neutrality. That the state doesn't have a say in what the good life is. And it's like, well, actually, by saying that no one can have a say in what the good life is, you are kind of stating what the good life can't be. And what the good life can't be is really believing in your faith and being, I mean, it's a pejorative word nowadays, but being a fanatic for your faith. Like you are prescribing what can and cannot be, and you're trying to neuter other people's view of what the good life can be while it tacitly encouraging others. And it's like, well, that's not neutral. That's very much not neutral. There is no such thing as that. All you're saying is giving a negative view of a good life and tacitly encouraging some, and sometimes by force disencouraging others from living out what they would see as the good life. And Habermas kind of fully buys into that. Because interestingly enough, the Spanish translation, because when I read some of it until I gave up, did have some insights, because we have the expression in Portuguese, Estado de Direito. I think it's Reichsstaat or Reichsstaat. It's Reichsstaat in German, which is very interesting that French, German, and Portuguese has like an expression for this sort of thing, but English doesn't, where it's basically a state in which rights are applied equally to everyone. There isn't a caste system or a royalty system or things like that. And the Reichsstaat, it very much is a liberal sort of idea. It really very much is a 19th century French and Prussian liberal idea, though it was kind of de facto already in existence at that point.